Okay, so let me share screen. So in last session, we discussed how we saw how Srila Prabhupada sat on the steps of Sumati Morarji's Scindia Steamship Company, and for 5 hours, actually, for 5 hours, and patiently waited for Sumati Morarji to come. And after she came, he got a donation to print the 3rd volume of the 1st canto. Just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Just give me Okay. So that was extraordinary, Prabhupada's patience and determination to get money for the printing of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we'll go on to the concluding part now. Janmashtami was drawing near. This is right after that incident with Sumati Morarji. Janmashtami was drawing near, and Bhaktivedanta Swami is planning a celebration at the Radha Damodar temple. He wanted to invite Bishwanath Das, the governor of Uttar Pradesh, to preside over the ceremony honoring Lord Krishna's appearance. Now, if you remember, Bishwanath Das was someone who highly praised Srila Prabhupada's 1st volume of Srimad Bhagavatam when it was printed. He was the governor of Uttar Pradesh. Sri Bishwanath had received a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam Volume 1 and had written a favorable review. Although a politician, he was known for his affection and respect for sadhus. He regularly invited sadhus to his home, and once a year he would visit all the important temples of Mathura and Vrindavan. Bhaktivedanta Swami asked Vrindavan's municipal president, Mangalal Sharma, to invite the governor to the Janmashtami celebration at Radha Damodar temple. The governor readily accepted the invitation. Bhaktivedanta Swami printed a flyer announcing, on the occasion of Janmashtami ceremony at the Samadhi ground of Srila Rupa and Jiva Goswami, Sri Sri Radha Damodar temple, Seva Kunj Vrindavan, Gaudiya Kirtana performances in the presence of His Excellency Sri Bishwanath Das, Governor of Uttar Pradesh, and the chief guest, Sri G.D. Somani of Bombay, trustee of Sri Ranganathji Temple, Vrindavan, dated Vrindavan, Sunday, the 31st August, 1964 at 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. The flyer contained an advertisement for the Srimad Bhagavatam series to be completed in 60 volumes. Bhajans to be sung on the occasion: Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu, Nitai Padakamala, the prayers to the 6 Goswamis, and other favorite songs of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas were printed in Bengali as a songbook. The program was successful. A large crowd attended and sang songs to Lord Krishna and took prasadam. Bhaktivedanta Swami lectured on a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam describing the age of Kali as an ocean of falls that had but one saving quality: the chanting of Hare Krishna. After leading Hare Krishna Kirtan, Bhaktivedanta Swami presented a copy of the 2nd volume of Srimad Bhagavatam to the governor and spoke of his plans to preach all over the world. Now, as I've brought this up earlier also, we see that consistency, the way Prabhupada approached preaching. He's consistently doing the same thing, preaching the Srimad Bhagavatam, describing how this the age of Kali is an ocean of falls. Later we'll see, as he goes to America, he says that this is a civilization of the cats and dog. So, so although they may be dressed like gentlemen, but actually it is the civilization of the cats and the dogs. So Prabhupada maintained this kind of a consistency in his preaching in terms of just speaking exactly what the reality is and inspiring people to take up to the process of Krishna consciousness. The day after Janmashtami was Bhaktivedanta Swami's 69th birthday. A few days later, Vishwanath Das requested, so this is 69th birthday, and we'll see that Prabhupada actually observed his 70th birthday on the ship Jaladuta. The day after Janmashtami was Bhaktivedanta Swami's 69th birthday. A few days later, Vishwanath Das requested Swami Maharaj to visit him at his mansion in Lucknow. It was a special occasion and the governor had invited several sadhus and planned a kirtan program. He had invited a professional musical group who toured India, performing kirtans and giving recitals. One of the musicians, young Shishir, is it Shishir or Shishir? What is it? How do you say in Bengal? Shishir. So one of the musicians, young Shishir Kumar Bhattacharya, was very impressed with Bhaktivedanta Swami. Shishir Bhattacharya is recollecting. We were invited to perform kirtan in the governor's house in Lucknow. We had about 7 or 8 in our group. This was the governor's house, a big home, and I was sitting on a dais. I saw the governor, Vishwanath Das, and beside him was a sadhu who was old, but I thought was really strong. When I saw the governor sitting there, I came down from the dais and bowed down. Then I asked which subject he wanted to listen to. He said, let's have something about Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Then I said, I'm very glad you selected this. About 1.5 hours we spent on Mahaprabhu's Kirtan. And then we had our dinner in the big banquet hall on all silver plates with the governor's symbols on each of them. We sat together and I was sitting side by side with the same sadhu, and he introduced himself as Bhaktivedanta Swami. We discussed, and then the Swami presented me with the book Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktivedanta Swami said, I'm interested to propagate Krishna Nam and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Western countries. I'm trying to get some way to find some ticket. If I get, I will go and I will propagate Mahaprabhu's teachings. And he uttered this verse from Mahaprabhu. Prithvite ache yata nagaradi gram sarvatra prachara hoibe moranam. But I did not think he would actually be able to do it because he was very simple and poor. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu predicted one day my name will be known in every town and village. That's the verse. Prithvite ache yata nagaradi gram sarvatra prachara hoibe moranam. Okay. So after a successful program at the Radha Damodar temple, so Prabhupada was invited by the governor as his guest at his Lucknow mansion. Now, we actually saw earlier how in the previous session how Sumati Morarji agreed to pay for the printing of the third volume of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can see how Prabhupada printed it, and he's trying to raise money. And then we have interesting intervention by Mr. Agarwal and also Mr. Krishna Pandit. So let's go on to that. With the manuscript for volume 3 complete and with the money to print it, Bhaktivedanta Swami once again entered the printing world, purchasing paper, correcting proofs, and keeping the printer on schedule so that the book would be finished by January of 1965. Thus, by his persistence, he who had almost no money of his own managed to publish his third large hardbound volume within a little more than 2 years. This is called the Hand of Krishna. At this rate, with his respect in the scholarly world increasing, he might soon become a recognized figure amongst his countrymen. But he had his vision set on the West, and with the third volume now printed, he felt he was at last prepared. He was 69 and would have to go soon. It had been more than 40 years since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had first asked a young householder in Calcutta to preach Krishna consciousness in the West. At first, it had seemed impossible to Abhay Sharan, who had so recently entered family responsibilities. That obstacle, however, had long ago been removed, and for more than 10 years, he had been free to travel. But he had been penniless and still was, and he had wanted to publish some volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam to take with him. It had seemed necessary if he were to do something solid. Now, by Krishna's grace, 3 volumes were on hand. Then Srila Prabhupada recollects. Srila Prabhupada, I planned that I must go to America. Generally, they go to London, but I did not want to go to London. I was simply thinking how to go to New York. I was scheming whether I shall go this way through Tokyo, Japan, or that way. Which way is cheaper? That was my proposal. And I was targeting to New York always. Sometimes I was dreaming that I have come to New York. Then Bhaktivedanta Swami met Mr. Agarwal, a Mathura businessman, and mentioned to him in passing, as he did to almost everyone he met, that he wanted to go to the West. Although Mr. Agarwal had known Bhaktivedanta Swami for only a few minutes, he volunteered to try to get him a sponsor in America. It was something Mr. Agarwal had done a number of times when he met a sadhu who mentioned something about going abroad to teach Hindu culture. He would ask his son Gopal, an engineer in Pennsylvania, to send back a sponsorship form. When Mr. Agarwal volunteered to help in this way, Bhaktivedanta Swami urged him please to do so. Srila Prabhupada recollects, I did not say anything seriously to Mr. Agarwal, but perhaps he took it very seriously. I asked him, well, why don't you ask your son Gopal to sponsor so that I can go there? I want to preach there. But Bhaktivedanta Swami knew he could not simply dream of going to the West. He needed money. In March of 1965, he made another visit to Mumbai, attempting to sell his books. Again, he stayed at the free Dharmashala, Prem Kutir, but finding customers was difficult. He met Paramananda Bhagwani, a librarian at Jai Hind College, who purchased books for the college library and then escorted Bhaktivedanta Swami to a few likely outlets. Mr. Bhagwani, I took him to the popular book depot at Grant Road to help him in selling books. But they told us they couldn't stock the books because they don't have much sales on religion. Then we went to another shop nearby, and the owner also regretted his inability to sell the books. Then he went to Sadhuvela near Mahalakshmi temple, and we met the head of the temple there. He, of course, welcomed us. They have a library of their own and they stock religious books. So we approached them to please keep a set there in their library. They are a wealthy ashrama, and yet he also expressed his inability. Bhaktivedanta Swami returned to Delhi, pursuing the usual avenues of book selling and looking for whatever opportunity might arise. And to his surprise, he was contacted by the Ministry of External Affairs and informed that his no objection certificate for going to the US was ready. Since he had not instigated any proceedings for leaving the country, Bhaktivedanta Swami had to inquire from the ministry about what had happened. They showed him the statutory declaration form signed by Mr. Gopal Agarwal of Butler, Pennsylvania. Mr. Agarwal solemnly declared that he would bear the expenses of Bhaktivedanta Swami during his stay in the US. Srila Prabhupada, whatever the correspondence was there between the father and son, I did not know. I simply asked him, why don't you ask your son Gopal to sponsor? And now, after 3 or 4 months, the no objection certificate was sent from the Indian consulate in New York to me. He had already sponsored my arrival there for 1 month, and all of a sudden, I got the paper. How extraordinary, how unusual that Mr. Agarwal showed an interest, and even when Prabhupada was not expecting it, it actually happened. So Mr. Agarwal is indeed a very glorious man. At his father's formality, something to satisfy his father, Gopal requested a form from the Indian consulate in New York. Gopal requested a form from the Indian consulate in New York, obtained a statement from his employer certifying his monthly salary, gotten a letter from his bank showing his balance as of April 1965, and had the form notarized. It had been stamped and approved in New York and sent to Delhi. Now, Bhaktivedanta Swami had a sponsor, but he still needed a passport, visa, P form, and travel fare. What is a P form? We'll soon come to that. The passport was not very difficult to obtain. Krishna Pandit helped, and by June 10th, he had his passport. Carefully, he penned in his address at the Radha Damodar temple in Chippivada and wrote his father's name, Gaur Mohan De. He asked Krishna Pandit to also pay for his going abroad, but Krishna Pandit refused, thinking it against Hindu principles for a sadhu to go abroad and also very expensive. These are not proper consideration. These are just some conventional. This is just some conventional understanding, and so Mr. Krishna Pandit had not deeply studied the scripture. This was a very superficial approach. In this part, we'll now read about how Sumati Morarji promised to send Srila Prabhupada on her cargo ship, and until a schedule was given to him and everything, all the arrangements were done, for him to go, he was given a residence at the Scindia colony, basically the Scindia, the same Scindia steamship colony. So it's basically Scindia colony. Okay. So with his passport and sponsorship papers, so we just saw how Mr. Krishna Pandit helped in getting him the passport, and his sponsorship paper was sent by Mr. Gopal Agarwal from Butler, Pennsylvania. With his passport and sponsorship papers, Bhaktivedanta Swami went to Bombay, not to sell books or raise funds for printing. He wanted a ticket for America. Again, he tried approaching Sumati Morarji. He showed his sponsorship papers to her secretary, Mr. Chokshi, who was impressed and who went to Mrs. Morarji on his behalf. The Swami from Vrindavan is back, he told her. He has published his book on your donation. He has a sponsor and he wants to go to America. He wants you to send him on a Scindia ship. Mrs. Morarji said, no, the Swamiji was too old to go to the United States and expect to accomplish anything. As Mr. Chokshi conveyed to him Mrs. Morarji's words, Bhaktivedanta Swami listened disapprovingly. She wanted him to stay in India and complete the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why go to the States? Finish the job here. But Bhaktivedanta Swami was fixed on going. He told Mr. Chokshi that he should convince Mrs. Morarji. He coached Mr. Chokshi on what he should say. I find this gentleman very inspired to go to the States and preach something to the people there. But when he told Mrs. Morarji, she again said no. The Swami was not healthy. It would be too cold there. He might not be able to come back. And she doubted whether he would be able to accomplish much there. People in America were not so cooperative, and they would probably not listen to him. Exasperated with Mr. Chokshi's ineffectiveness, Bhaktivedanta Swami demanded a personal interview. It was granted, and a grey-haired, determined Bhaktivedanta Swami presented his emphatic request. Please give me one ticket. Sumati Morarji was concerned. Swamiji, you're so old, you're taking this responsibility. Do you think it is all right? No, he reassured her, lifting his hand as if to reassure a doubting daughter. It is all right. But do you know what my secretaries think? They say Swamiji is going to die there. Bhaktivedanta Swami made a face as if to dismiss a foolish rumor. Again, he insisted that she give him a ticket. All right, she said. Get your P-form and I will make an arrangement to send you by our ship. So Prabhupada's determination was successful with Mrs. Sumati Morarji. Bhaktivedanta Swami smiled brilliantly and happily left her offices, past her amazed and skeptical clerks. Just give me a second. It's a bit too hot and humid here. I just need to drink some water. Okay, P form, another necessity for an Indian national who wants to leave the country, is a certificate given by the State Bank of India, certifying that the person has no excessive debts in India and is cleared by the banks. You don't have that anymore, but this is a requirement during those days. That would take a while to obtain, and he also did not yet have a US visa. He needed to pursue these government permissions in Bombay, but he had no place to stay. Now notice what happens now. So Mrs. Morarji agreed to let him reside at the Scindia colony, a compound of apartments for employees of the Scindia company. Now, how greatly fortunate these residents of the Scindia company were. The greatest personality who has walked on planet Earth. Of course, when you say greatest, I don't mean greatest with the exclusion of the previous acharyas, but the greatest personality who has walked across the entire planet is the right description. Now, he was personally residing at the compound where the employees of the Scindia company were residing. How fortunate these residents of the Scindia company colony were. Okay, let's see. He stayed in a small, unfurnished apartment with only his trunk and typewriter. The resident Scindia employees all knew that Mrs. Morarji was sending him to the West, and some of them became interested in his cause. They were impressed, for although he was so old, was going abroad to preach, he was a special sadhu, a scholar. They heard from him how he was taking hundreds of copies of his books with him, but no money. He became a celebrity at the Scindia colony. Various families brought him rice, sabji, and fruit. What could be a greater perfection of life to serve the Bhaktivedanta, the pure? Various families brought him rice, sabji, and fruit. They brought so much that he could not eat it all. And he mentioned this to Mr. Chokshi. Just accept it and distribute it, Mr. Chokshi advised. Bhaktivedanta Swami then remnants of his food to the children. Some of the older residents gathered to hear him as he read and spoke from Srimad Bhagavatam. Mr. Vasavada, the chief cashier of Scindia, was particularly impressed and came regularly to hear from the sadhu. Mr. Vasavada obtained copies of Bhaktivedanta Swami's books and read them in his home. Bhaktivedanta Swami's apartment shared a roofed-in veranda with Mr. Nagarajan, a Scindia office worker, and his wife. Most probably an accountant, I guess, because South Indian Tamil Brahmins are usually accountants. Well, we don't know. It says office worker and his wife. Okay. Mrs. Nagarajan. Every time when I passed that way, he used to be writing or chanting. I would ask him, Swamiji, what are you writing? He used to sit near the window and one after another was translating the Sanskrit. He gave me 2 books and said, child, if you read this book, you will understand. We would have discourses in the house and 4 or 5 Gujarati ladies used to come. At one of these discourses, he told one lady that those who wear their hair parted on the side, that is not a good idea. Every Indian lady should have her hair parted on the center. They were very fond of listening and very keen to hear his discourse. Prabhupada, later also you'll find, to go to America, he says that the middle part is for chaste women and the side part is for the unchaste woman. At least that was the convention in India. That was what is conventionally how you know someone is from a dignified family or someone is loose, L-O-S-E, yeah, in their behavior. Every day, he would go out trying to get his visa and P form as quickly as possible, selling his books and seeking contacts and supporters for his future Srimad Bhagavatam publishing. Mr. Nagarajan tried to help using the telephone directory. This is a very interesting idea what he did. Using the telephone directory, he made a list of wealthy business and professional men who were Vaishnavas and might be inclined to assist. So he kind of filtered it and to wealthy and professional men who were also Vaishnavas. Bhaktivedanta Swami's neighbors at Scindia colony observed him coming home dead tired in the evening. He would sit quietly, perhaps feeling morose, some neighbors thought. But after a while, he would sit up, rejuvenated, and start writing. Mrs. Nagarajan. When he came home, we used to give him courage. And we used to tell him, Swamiji, one day you will achieve your target. He would say, time is still not right. Time is still not right. They are all agyanis. They don't understand. But still, I must carry on. Prabhupada is using very strong words. They are all agyanis. Usually, sadhus don't talk like this about general mass of people. But Prabhupada was a sadhu. Sadhu means one who cuts. So he speaks the truth. They don't understand, but still I must carry on. Sometimes I would go by and his chadar would be on the chair, but he would be sitting on the windowsill. I would ask him, Swamiji, did you have any good contacts? He would say, not much today. I didn't get much. And it is depressing. Tomorrow, Krishna will give me more details. And he would sit there quietly. After 10 minutes, he would sit in his chair and start writing. I would wonder how Swamiji was so tired in 1 minute. In another minute, even if he was tired, he was not defeated. He would never speak discouragement. And we would always encourage him and say, if today you don't get it, tomorrow you will definitely meet some people and they will encourage you. And my friends used to come in the morning and in the evening for discourse, and they would give namaskara and fruits. Now, Mr. Nagarajan, the husband of Mrs. Nagarajan, Mr. Nagarajan, his temperament was very adjustable and homely. Our friends would offer a few rupees. He would say, all right, it will help. He used to walk from our colony to Andheri station. Please notice this sentence. He used to walk from our colony to Andheri station. It is 2 kilometers. And he used to go there without taking a bus because he had no money. So till the end, you can see Prabhupada has no money, but somehow or the other, Krishna has taken charge, and things are going very smoothly and in a very promising manner. Bhaktivedanta Swami had a page printed entitled My Mission, and he would show it to influential men in his attempts to get further financing for Srimad Bhagavatam. The printed statement proposed that God consciousness was the only remedy for the evils of modern materialistic society. There again, straight, clear message. The printed statement proposed that God consciousness was the only remedy for the evils of modern materialistic society. Despite scientific advancement and material comforts, there is no peace in the world. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the glory of India, must be spread all over the world. Mrs. Morarji asked Bhaktivedanta Swami if he would read Srimad Bhagavatam to her in the evening. He agreed. She began sending her car for him at 6 o'clock each evening, and they would sit in her garden where he would recite and comment on the Bhagavatam. Mrs. Morarji as is usually done with the Bhagavatam. And certain points, when you sit and discuss, you raise so many points. He was commenting on certain points. But it is Bhagavatam. So he used to sit and explain to me and then go. He could give time and I could hear him. That was for about 10 or 15 days. His backing by Cynthia and his sponsorship in the US were a strong presentation. And with the help of the people at Cynthia, he obtained his visa on July 28, 1965. But the P-form proceedings went slowly and even threatened to be a last insurmountable obstacle. Okay, just give me 1 second. Okay, just give me 1 second. Okay, securing P-form and final arrangements. Okay, finally Prabhupada gets a P-form, narrates what happened. Srila Prabhupada, formerly there was no restriction for going outside, but for a sannyasi like me, I had so much difficulty obtaining the government permission to go out. I had applied for the P-form sanction, but no sanction was coming. Then I went to the State Bank of India. Mr. Martar Chari, he told me, Swamiji, you are sponsored by a private man, so we cannot accept. If you are invited by some institution, then we could consider. But you're invited by a private man for 1 month. And after 1 month, if you are in difficulty, there will be so many obstacles. But I had already prepared everything to go. So I said, what have you done? He said, I have decided not to sanction your P-form. I said, no, don't do this. You better send me to your superior. It should not be like that. So he took my request and he sent the file to the chief official of foreign exchange, something like that. So he was a supreme man in the State Bank of India. I went to see him. I asked the secretary, do you have such and such a file? You kindly put it to Mr. Rao. I want to see him. So the secretary agreed and he put the file and he put my name down to see him. I was waiting. So Mr. Rao came personally. He said, Swamiji, I passed your case. Don't worry, Jai. So following Mrs. Morarji's instruction, her secretary, Mr. Chokshi, made final arrangements for Bhaktivedanta Swami. Since he had no warm clothes, Mr. Chokshi took him to buy a wool jacket and other woolen clothes. Mr. Chokshi spent about 250 rupees on new clothes, including some new dhotis. At Bhaktivedanta Swami's request, notice this, at Bhaktivedanta Swami's request, Mr. Chokshi printed 500 copies of a small pamphlet containing the 8 verses written by Lord Caitanya and an advertisement for Srimad Bhagavatam in the context of an advertisement for the Scindia Steamship Company. Mr. Chokshi, I asked him, why couldn't you go earlier? Why do you want to go now to the States at this age? He replied that I will be able to do something good, I am sure. His idea was that someone should be there who would be able to go near people who are lost in life and teach them and tell them what the correct thing is. This is called compassion. To be able to go near people who are lost in life, to teach them, tell them what the correct thing is. Unless we see that the people are lost, we will not be able to preach like this. So genuine preachers, those who are really compassionate, they know that people are lost and they want to teach them, tell them what the correct thing is. I asked him so many times, why do you want to go to the States? Why don't you start something in Bombay or Delhi or Vrindavan? I was teasing him also, interested in seeing the States. Therefore, you want to go. All Swamijis want to go to the States and you want to enjoy there. He said, what have I got to see? I have finished my life. But sometimes he was hot-tempered. He would get angry at me for the delays. What is this nonsense? He would say. Then I would understand. He's getting angry now. Sometimes he would say, oh, Mrs. Morarji has still not signed this paper. She says, come back tomorrow. We will talk tomorrow. What is this? Why this daily going back? He would get angry. Then I would say, you can sit here. But he would say, how long do I have to sit? He would become impatient. Legitimately impatient for the delays. Finally, Mrs. Morarji scheduled a place for him on one of her ships, the Jaladuta, which was sailing from Calcutta on August 13th. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but it's an interesting thing that Prabhupada left on August 13th. Is also, it's like the Friday the 13th, August 13th, 1965. I remember once I printed a T-shirt. I got it printed. It said, "What's with Friday the 13th, August 65?" And people would generally ask, "What is this? What is 1965? What is the Friday 13th connection?" Then I would get an opportunity to talk to people about Prabhupada's departure, and I would say my tilak you see on my face is because of August 13th, 1965. So, oh, that's a connection. Okay. Anyway, that would give me an opportunity to preach. So that's why I did it. She had made certain that he would travel on a ship. Captain understood the needs of a vegetarian and a Brahmana. Oh, so your internet connection is unstable. Fine. She had made certain that he would travel on a ship. This is quite extraordinary of Mrs. Morarji. She had made certain that he would travel on a ship whose captain understood the needs of a vegetarian and a Brahmana. Mrs. Morarji told the Jaladuta's captain, Arun Pandya, to carry extra vegetables and fruits for the Swami. Now, this is Arun Pandya is another very rare gentleman to be able to spend such a long duration of journey with Srila Prabhupada, personally serving Srila Prabhupada, apart from being the captain. These are all what do you call Krishna's supremely kind arrangements. For we have no clue who these great personalities are, or rather who these personalities are. I can't say great personalities until someone is a practicing devotee. But nevertheless, these were arranged by Krishna, who were brought together by Krishna to help Srila Prabhupada. Mr. Chokshi spent the last 2 days with Bhaktivedanta Swami in Bombay, picking up the pamphlets at the press, purchasing clothes, and driving him to the station to catch the train for Calcutta. Then we come to the final section of the first departure from India. I mean, this particular section is like, it's got a, in my personal life, this section always kind of reverberated in my mind. Even today, as I'm going to read it, it still reverberates. All what is there in this section, especially the very last line that you will find in this section. So let's proceed with this section. Most ecstatic section in this first volume. Of course, everything is ecstatic, but this has got a special significance. Departure from India. He arrived in Calcutta about 2 weeks before the Jaladuta's departure. So from Bombay, he arrived in Calcutta about 2 weeks before the Jaladuta's departure. Although he had lived much of his life in the city, he now had nowhere to stay. It was as he had written in his Vrindavan Bhajan, I have my wife, sons, daughters, grandsons, everything, but I have no money. So they are a fruitless glory. Although in the city, he had been so carefully nurtured as a child, those early days were also gone forever. Where have my loving father and mother gone to now? And where are all my elders who are my own folk? Who will give me news of them? Tell me who. All that is left of this family life is a list of names. Now notice another thing which happens here. How nicely Satsvarupa Maharaj captures this. Out of hundreds of people in Calcutta. Now Prabhupada grew up in Calcutta. Out of hundreds of people in Calcutta whom Bhaktivedanta Swami knew, he chose to call on Mr. Shishir Bhattacharya, the flamboyant Kirtan singer he had met a year before at the governor's house in Lucknow. Now, who is this personality, Shishir Bhattacharya? Why Prabhupada called him? Of course, he was enthusiastic when Prabhupada spoke to him about his plans for going to the West. Nevertheless, out of hundreds of people that he knew, he chose to call upon this Shishir Bhattacharya. Again, what a fortunate personality. Mr. Bhattacharya was not a relative, not a disciple, not even a close friend, but he was willing to help. Bhaktivedanta Swami called at his place and informed him that he would be leaving on a cargo ship in a few days He needed a place to stay and he would like to give some lectures. Mr. Bhattacharya immediately began to arrange a few private meetings at friends' homes where he would sing and Bhaktivedanta Swami would then speak. Mr. Bhattacharya thought the sadhus leaving for America should make an important news story. He accompanied Bhaktivedanta Swami to all the newspapers in Calcutta, the Hindustan Standard, the Amrit Bazar Patrika, the Jugantas, the Statesman, and others. Bhaktivedanta Swami had only one photograph, a passport photo, and they made a few copies for the newspapers. Mr. Bhattacharya would try to explain what the Swami was going to do, and the news writers would listen, but none of them wrote anything. Finally, they visited the Dainik Basumati, a local Bengali daily, which agreed to print a small article with Bhaktivedanta Swami's picture. A week before his departure, on August 6th, Bhaktivedanta Swami traveled to nearby Mayapur to visit the Samadhi of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Then he returned to Calcutta, where Mr. Bhattacharya continued to assist him with his final business and speaking engagements. Now, this week before departure, when Srila Prabhupada visited Mayapur and went to the Samadhi of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, it is explained that during this visit, Srila Prabhupada also went to Shantipur to pray to Advaitacharya. So the priest of Shantipur, the head priest of Shantipur, recollects Srila Prabhupada coming to Shantipur in the first week of August 1965 and earnestly praying to Advaitacharya before traveling to the West. Mr. Bhattacharya, this is about speaking engagements. We took a hired taxi to this place and that place. And he would go for preaching. I never talked to him during the preaching. But once when I was coming back from the preaching, I said, you said this thing about this, but I tell you it is not this. Yes, it's correct. The power went off and we were disconnected. So we'll resume. Read again. I didn't share screen. Okay, so we were talking about Mr. Shishir Bhattacharya. Out of hundreds of people the Prabhupada knew in Calcutta, he called upon Shishir Bhattacharya and how he was taking around the newspapers and trying to publish a news item about Prabhupada going to America. And he'll also take him on preaching assignments. Mr. Bhattacharya, we just took a hired taxi to this place and that place, and he would go for preaching. I never talked to him during the preaching, but once when I was coming back from the preaching, I said, you said this thing about this, but I tell you it is not this, it is this. I crossed him in something or argue, and he was furious. When we argued, and I said, no, I think this is this, then he was shouting. He was very furious. He said, you are always saying, I think, I think, I think. What is the importance of what you think? Everything is what you think, but it doesn't matter. It matters what Shastra says. You must follow. I said, I must do what I think, what I feel, that is important. He said, no, you should forget this. You should forget your desire. You should change your habit. Better you depend on Shastras. You follow what Shastra wants you to do and do it. I am not telling you what I think, but I'm repeating what the Shastra says. This is signature Prabhupada. It doesn't matter. Shishir Bhattacharya is the one who is taking him around. And he's not thinking, if I speak strongly, what will happen to me? What will Mr. Bhattacharya think? Maybe he will not help me anymore. Prabhupada is not interested in these things. He is interested in genuinely helping Mr. Bhattacharya. And he's speaking the truth as it is. This is signature Prabhupada. He gets upset if people do not take shelter of Shastra, but instead resort to their own minds, because that is harmful. As the day of his departure approached, Bhaktivedanta Swami took stock of his meager possessions. He had only a suitcase, an umbrella, and a supply of dry cereal. He did not know what he would find to eat in America. Perhaps there would be only meat. If so, he was prepared to live on boiled potatoes and the cereal. His main baggage, several trunks of his books, was being handled separately by Scindia Cargo. 200, that 3-volume sets, which means that 600 books he carried with him. 200 3-volume sets, the very thought of the books gave him confidence. When the day came for him to leave, he needed that confidence. He was making a momentous break with his previous life, and he was dangerously old and not in strong health. And he was going to an unknown and probably unwelcoming country. Now notice what he writes here. To be poor and unknown in India was one thing. Even in these Kali Yuga days, when India's leaders were rejecting Vedic culture and imitating the West, it was still India. It was still the remains of Vedic civilization. He had been able to see millionaires, governors, the prime minister, simply by showing up at their doors and waiting. The sannyasi was respected. The Srimad Bhagavatam was respected. But in America, it would be different. He would be no one, a foreigner. And there was no tradition of sadhus, no temples, no free ashrams. But when he thought of the books he was bringing, transcendental knowledge in English, he became confident. When he met someone in America, he would give him a flyer. Srimad Bhagavatam, India's message of peace and goodwill. It was August 13th, just a few days before Janmashtami, the appearance day anniversary of Lord Krishna. The next day would be his own 69th birthday. During these last years, he had been in Vrindavan for Janmashtami. Many Vrindavan residents would never leave there. They were old and at peace in Vrindavan. Bhaktivedanta Swami was also concerned that he might die away from Vrindavan. That is why all the Vaishnava sadhus and widows had taken vows not to leave, even for Mathura, because die in Vrindavan was the perfection of life. And the Hindu tradition was that a sannyasi should not cross the ocean and go to the land of the Mlechas. But beyond all that was the desire of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And his desire was non-different from that of Lord Krishna. And Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu had predicted that the chanting of Hare Krishna would be known in every town and village of the world. Bhaktivedanta Swami took a taxi down to the Calcutta port. A few friends and admirers, along with the son Vrindavan, accompanied him. A few friends and admirers, along with the son Vrindavan, accompanied him. He writes in his diary, today at 9 a.m., embarked on MV Jaladuta. Came with me Bhagavati, the Dwarvan of Scindia, Sansir, the Dwarvan of Scindia, Sansir, Mr. Sen Gupta, Mr. Ali, and Vrindavan. What is Scindia, Sansir? Dwarvan? He was carrying a Bengali copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which he intended to read during the crossing. Somehow he would be able to cook on board. If not, he could starve, whatever Krishna desired. He checked his essentials: passenger ticket, passport, visa, P-form, sponsor's address. Finally, it was happening. Srila Prabhupada, with what great difficulty I got out of the country, somehow, some way or other, by Krishna's grace, I got out so I could spread the Krishna conscious movement all over the world. Otherwise, to remain in India, it is not possible. I wanted to start a movement in India, but I was not at all encouraged. The black cargo ship, small and weathered, was moored at dockside, a gangway leading from the dock to the ship's deck. Indian merchant sailors curiously eyed elderly saffron-dressed sadhu as he spoke last words to his companions. Now they're watching. The companions are Bhagavati and Sansir, Mr. Sen Gupta, Mr. Ali, Vrindavan, his son. As he spoke last words to his companions and then left them and walked determinedly toward the boat. Oh, Krishna. For thousands of years, Krishna Bhakti had been known only in India, not outside, except in twisted faith. For thousands of years, Krishna Bhakti had been known only in India, not outside, except in twisted, faithless reports by foreigners. The only Swamis to have reached America had been non-devotees, Mayavadi impersonalists. But now Krishna was sending Bhaktivedanta Swami as his emissary. Now notice this. Notice the way Satsarupal writes it. But now Krishna was sending Bhaktivedanta Swami as his emissary. Now the most crucial part, not crucial, the most, the most, what do you call it? Poignant part, the most touching part is the last recollection. But somehow the devotee who compiled this has skipped it. I don't know why or how. Okay, so I'll read it out directly from the book. Okay. Those of you who are the Vedabas can follow, read along, can read it along with me, or you can just hear me. Mr. Shishir Bhattacharya. He was alone, a lone fighter. When he left, there was no one on the shore to bid him goodbye. I think he's referring here to the fact that after everyone left, he was still standing. There was no one on the shore to bid him goodbye. No friends, no supporter, no disciple, nobody. Even if you call me, I was not a disciple of his. I was a disciple of somebody else. So I was not his follower, but due to shared love, I had very much respect for him. So I was the only person standing on the shore to say him goodbye. No one was with me. I could not know that it was such an important thing. It's a very fitting ending to the first volume. I could not know that it was such an important thing. So this is he's recollecting later after Prabhupada's success. And what should I say? Should I call it Krishna's arrangement, or I don't know what to call it? But this particular thing, how this Shishur Bhattacharya's recollection, I had actually memorized it almost. And during my years in college in the early 1990s, I would repeatedly quote this thing, how Prabhupada was determined. He went to America, especially this recollection of Mr. Shishir Bhattacharya. I would recollect to my college mates, and very, I don't know what do you call it? It's definitely Krishna's will that of all time, of all, what do you call it? In these, okay, that was I passed out of college in 1996. So until 26 years later, yesterday, some of my friends from college got in touch with me. I was very surprised how they got in touch with me. And it is these very friends to whom I would repeatedly say this last paragraph of this first volume. And here we are on the very next day, I'm just reading it. So I just found it to be a very interesting and a very, what do you call it, a very unusual coincidence, or you could call it Krishna's arrangement. Okay, so this chapter is called The Dream Comes True. So there it is. Prabhupada so much, he struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled. Even until the very last, he struggled. No money, he struggled. But he made it. He made it on board the Jaladuta. And the ship was setting sail. The next volume, we'll see what happens in the ship. But he had boarded the ship. So it was finally the dream come true. Okay, so I think I'll stop here. I think there is nothing else left in this first volume. So what I'll do is that in the coming week, I'll post on the group. Different devotees have been asking me for the notes on this, the points that I made, and also the whatever I read out. So I'll definitely post it in the coming week before next session. So thank you very much. If there are any comments or questions. Banking Govinda Prabhu. Go ahead.
Krishna Prabhu, Dandat Pranam. Prabhu, thanks Prabhu for the class, excellent class. Prabhu, one thing you just told about that for several thousand years, Lord Krishna was known only in India, and Prabhupada has then taken it abroad. So as a devotee, I'm really proud of it. I mean, that's something which we all should be proud. But on the other hand, I'm a little bewildered with one other fact that if you see Lord Krishna come 5,000 years back, and Mahaprabhu 500 years back. And yet, as on date, if you see, the Hindu population should not be more than 15% across the globe. And again, in that, those in Krishna conscious devotees will be hardly 1 or 2%. So this is something which I'm wondering, why is this figure so low? Obviously, there will be some reason why what Krishna wants to convey to us and what we have to do going forward. So that is something which is lingering in my mind as well.
This Prabhupada addressed this several times when during his pastimes, physical pastimes on this planet, manifest pastimes. He repeatedly said that at one point in this, while expanding the Krishna consciousness movement, he said, we have to boil the milk. Otherwise, if you add water to milk, after some time, it'll just become like water. So where is the milk? So he said, we need to boil the milk, make it thick. So the idea there was that there also Prabhupada would say that I am interested in one moon than many stars. Now there can be millions of stars. There are millions of stars. But that one moon in the sky is powerful than those millions of stars in terms of illumination. Right? So like that, Prabhupada is not so much concerned about somehow or other making everyone take to Krishna consciousness. He was concerned about Yes, he was concerned about it, but his concern was that they should become pure devotees. There are hundreds and thousands and millions of people practicing Krishna Bhakti in India. Rupa Goswami didn't come, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't come to give that same kind of bhakti, which people know from ages. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't come to give that. Rupa Goswami didn't teach that. Prabhupada is not giving that. What are they doing? They are teaching Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadhi Anavritam Anukuliyana Krishnanushilanam Bhakti Uttamam. They are teaching us Uttama Bhakti. That is one of its kind. It's not mixed. It's not with some motive, desire, and all that. It is spotless. That is what they have come to teach. And definitely, as Prabhupada said, if you try to go and sell diamonds in the street, there will not be so many customers, because we are selling that which is very valuable, very rare, Uttama Bhakti. That Uttama Bhakti by which Krishna was Ajita becomes Jita. Unconquerable becomes conquered. So it's not something ordinary. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, do not be discouraged that the people of this world may not respond favorably to Krishna consciousness. We have to carry on with the Krishna conscious movement. And that's why Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita also, even if one person becomes a pure devotee, meaning attains love of God, that's the meaning of pure devotee in that context. That even if one person attains love of God, Prabhupada is saying, my mission is successful. The same thing was told even by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So the idea is that what is the use of a million stars? One moon is better than a million stars. This is Prabhupada's mood. Of course, if we can make a million moons, yes, fantastic. That is Prabhupada tried to do that also. That we should also attempt to do that. But we should not be so much worried about whether it's what is the percentages and statistics. So much. Prabhupada is not so much worried about that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. I think there is one more hand which went up. Two hands. There's some point in the chat. Question in the chat. Okay, thank you, Mataji. She's saying thank you very much for the nice class. Okay. Sailesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Guruji, Dandava Pranam, wonderful class, very ecstatic indeed. Just a quick clarification, you mentioned earlier, obviously we know that Prabhupada was 69 and he turned 70 on the boat, but I think you mentioned that Janmashtami is tomorrow and I will be turning 69 when he was referring to the passage on the boat.
No, if you go, no, hold on, just hold on. No, when he boarded Jaladuta in 1965, their Prabhupada is talking about 70, right?
I think you mentioned 69. I think that's why I got confused. So
that was the earlier. That was the earlier year, right? 1 minute. I will just
no. It doesn't matter. But I just wanted to check that I didn't get it wrong. So that was fine. Okay. So you turned 70 on the boat, yeah?
Yeah, but at the same time, see, Prabhupada. I mean, I've noticed that Prabhupada actually counts the years in a different manner than what we normally do, right? I mean, he actually counts. He counts 1 year extra. I don't know if that is the reason why Satsurumara put it like that. Because technically speaking, 1965 is not 70. It should be 69, right? Technically speaking. But 64, he says 69, and then he talks about 70 in the 1 minute. Let me just share the screen. Let us look at it once more. See, what happens in India is like on Vedic thing is like the time that you're born. Before I go on to I look in the book. That may be more easier. Let me just look in the book. This screen is a little bit worrying. I mean, confusing to you. Okay, see what they do in India, I don't know, maybe it's in the other parts of the world also. Like yeah, Hare Krishna. See, this is in regard to the dream. I mean, the flyer of announcing Janmashtami. So there, Satsvarup Maharaj mentions that when he invited Bishwanath Das, that if you remember was the 31st of August, 1964. So there it says that the day after Janmashtami was Bhaktivedanta Swami's 69th birthday. So 64 is technically not 69, 68, but it's considered, Prabhupada would use that of considering it 69. Like, for example, yeah, well, I don't know. I think I explained that, right? For example, 0 to 1 is considered as the first year, 1 is considered as the second year. So that is the convention that Prabhupada followed. So although from our standard conventions that we know of, we call it as the 68, but Prabhupada refers to it as the 69th. That's what it is. But 70th was when he went, because 64 is 69, 1964 is 69. So therefore 1960 70th, which is also what Satsvarup Maharaj mentions. Let me just check that. It was August 13th, just a few days before Janmashtami, the appearance day anniversary of Lord Krishna. The next day would be 70th birthday. Shailesh Prabhu, is that okay?
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. I understand that this discrepancy is probably the Indian way of counting or running year compared to completed year. I think in the
Exactly.
West, it's when you reach the first anniversary, you consider as being one, but in India, the terminology is the running year is the year you count as being your age. So yeah.
Yeah, they said you're now in the second year, like they call it like that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Wonderful class, by the way. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Indulekha Kripa Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Prabhuji. My question is just like, now Prabhupada took his 3 volumes of the first canto of Bhagavatam.
Yes,
so,
Mataji.
yeah, because now the first canto, now what present is very thick. And Prabhupada was thinking of making 60 volumes of the first canto, no, Prabhu? That is what
No. See, he envisioned printing the Bhagavatam in 60 volumes. Entire Bhagavatam in 60 volumes.
Okay.
So first canto came in 3 volumes. And he took 200 sets of the first volume.
Yeah, okay. That's what I wanted to clear. Because
first canto came in 3 volumes. Okay. And he took 200 sets of the first canto. That's what it is.
Okay. That is 600 books he took.
Exactly. He took traveled with 600 books.
Yeah. Okay. So he took only first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam to US in the beginning.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll close early today and we'll resume next week. And during the week, as promised, I will send it sequentially, whatever we did in volume 1. And now
Sorry,
Mataji?
any synopsis for this today's this one, Prabhuji, from the like what we summarize every week?
Okay,
Only
yeah,
if it is there, it's okay.
No, everything has a synopsis. I just didn't remember this time. Okay. Thank you for bringing it up. Okay. I mean, for me, when I read this particular section of the Leelamrita, what really comes across to me is that I was in Rupa Goswami Samadhi last month I went to see Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he took us on a group of devotees to Rupa Goswami Samadhi. So there we were outside Prabhupada's rooms, and standing there outside Prabhupada's room, Vaisheshika Prabhu told us, can you imagine that 1960s, how this place must have been, the whole Vrindavan, how remote and how I mean, it's a third world country like India, and here some Indian sadhu sitting here and working and thinking that he's going to transform the whole world. How improbable that would have been. How improbable that would have been. So, but nevertheless, he mentioned that Prabhupada had this thing that there's a lecture. I mean, I forgot to remind him, but he told me he'll send me that lecture. Somehow I've not read that particular thing, where Prabhupada said the secret of how I could achieve what I achieved was I kept on thinking, how shall I do it? 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 Prabhupada never gave up that. That was something which was there in every breath of his was filled with that. How shall I do it? How shall I do it? How shall I do it? I said every breath because while waking or sleeping, you take your breath, right? So every breath would, if you put a stethoscope into Prabhupada's heart, you would hear that. How shall I do it? 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 So that was Prabhupada said was his only way how he accomplished it. It's not that he had some I will do this and I will do that, and he never had made all these fancy plan making. He had only one thing in his mind, which was how shall I do it? How shall I do it? How shall I do it? So if one adopts that same mood that Srila Prabhupada was in, how shall we do it? How shall we do it? How shall we do it? Then we notice in this particular chapter, especially, you can see how all the different elements are coming together. And Prabhupada, at the end of the chapter, we see that he has boarded the Jaladuta. That's just something monumental. I mean, considering the fact that it was against all odds, 69-year-old, 69-year-old, a 70-year-old gentleman, who was refused so many times, was discouraged, who had no money. You put all the odds together and there it was. But nevertheless, Prabhupada always thought, how shall I do it? How shall I do it? How shall I do it? So that, I think, should be our meditation also. That how shall we do it? How shall we do it? How shall we do it? Is that okay, Madhuri?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, so, okay, fine. There are no more questions or comments. Then we'll stop for today. Stopping almost half an hour early. Okay, so we'll resume next class. Thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bheva cha paritanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo